Please be seated. Well, there is no sermon today.
Okay, then.
But before you all stand up and applaud, I am going to use this time to tell you a little bit about my personal history. You see, yesterday, January 10th, was my 50th anniversary of being ordained in the Episcopal Church as a deacon.
Wow.
So, I want to tell you a little bit about how I got there. And so you'll know a little bit more about me. My journey as a Christian began on Mother's Day in 1947 when I was baptized in the Main Street Evangelical United Brethren Church in Mansfield, Ohio. And I will tie this in now with lessons for today with the one phrase that comes from our baptismal service. There is one faith, one Lord, and one baptism. So I was baptized as a Christian. I didn't have to be rebaptized to become an Episcopalian. So quickly, I grew up in the church. Our family was active in the church. And I was very active in the church, mainly possibly because I was highly encouraged to be in church every Sunday. I had 13 years of perfect attendance before I left for college. So they didn't start giving perfect attendance when you were babies either. You had to be a little older than that. So anyway, church was important to us as a family. We were in church every Sunday. We sat in the second or third pew every Sunday. We were active in all the activities of the church. But, even though we were church people, we weren't exactly what I would call religious people at home. I mean, we didn't do Bible study at home. We didn't do grace at meals, except maybe Thanksgiving and Christmas. But, it was built into who we were. So active in the youth group as I got older. Also, when I became 11, I got active in Boy Scouts, and Boy Scouts became a very important part of my life all through school and a little bit into college. At 14, I became a nature counselor at the Boy Scout camp. I was there for 2 years, and then after that, I was another, 16 years doing camp counselor, camp director, and finally becoming a camp director at a settlement house camp outside our hometown. So after I was in Boy Scouts, I became an Eagle Scout at 16, and then after that I worked on my God and Country Award and received that also. So skipping over some of those high school days, we don't really need to talk about all of those days. I went off to college. I went off to college at Otterbein College, which at that time was an Evangelical United Brethren related college in the quiet, peaceful village of Westerville, Ohio, which was home of the Women's Temperance Union.
So much for party.
Yeah, it was illegal in the city of Westerville. But anyway, it was a good, quiet, peaceful village. And while I was there, I did something that nobody else has ever done, I don't think, is as a freshman, I would get on my 10-speed bike and I attempted to visit every church in Westerville on a Sunday morning for a service, because I wanted to learn about all the various denominations and everything that was going on. So I would go to a new church almost every Sunday, and the churches when I didn't go to a new church, I went to one of the two EUB churches in town. So that went on for the first year. The second year, my sophomore year, I had to take a required course, which many of you probably took, called Humanities 101. And Humanities 101 was taught by Mrs. Frank, and it was visual arts and music appreciation, and we spent a lot of time talking about architecture, because I think she really liked architecture. It was the mid-'60s, so there was a lot of buildings going up. New architectural, new styles, and for some reason there were a lot of new banks going up. So we talked about bank architecture for some reason. But also, there was a lot of churches being built, so we talked about church architecture. And we saw some beautiful pictures of churches, new churches that were being built, and so forth. Well, in the quiet, peaceful village of Westerville, there was a small Episcopal mission that was meeting in the Legion Hall, I think. And they built a new church. And it was a small church, and Mrs. Frank, who was a Unitarian, announced in class that she was going to go to the Episcopal church the next Sunday. So anybody that wanted to go and join her at the church were welcome to do so. No extra credit, no brownie points, no nothing, but you can come and see how this church was built, you know, how it has to form, has to follow function. And it was a very interesting design church. It was basically a rectangle with an altar, and it was designed with chairs so it could be used as a parish hall and all of those kinds of things. The altar rail was just like little metal things with a T on the top so you could kneel, but it wasn't a fence. So it was very, very, very nice church. Well, anyway, I fell in love with the liturgy of the Episcopal Church at that first service. And this was Ohio. It was low church, very simple liturgy, but I still got very attached to it. So I started going to the Episcopal Church every other Sunday because the other Sundays were closed communion. And so I wasn't able to do that. So I went back to the UB churches on those other Sundays and other places. But after college, I moved and took my first teaching job in Rockford, Illinois. And I took a teaching job at an outdoor education school where the students came and spent a week at a time out in the outdoors. Well, when I moved to Rockford, I immediately checked out the 3 Episcopal churches in town, and I settled on Emmanuel Episcopal Church in downtown Rockford. And there, for the first time, I was exposed to high church. And I mean high church. Because you see, Northern Illinois and other parts of Illinois and Wisconsin and Chicago were known as the Beretta Belt. You remember the Berettas are those little funny caps that priests wear? High church, in other words. Very high church part of the country. And I even fell in love more with the Episcopal Church during those days. I loved the high church. And because I was teaching in the outdoor education school, and I was also the nighttime overseer of the church, not at the church, of the camp and conference center, I couldn't attend confirmation classes. So the priest says, well, I'll give you private confirmation classes. So he and I met once a week for a while, and I got my private confirmation instruction and was eventually confirmed into the Episcopal Church. Well, that was all fine and good for me, but back in Ohio, my mother was not pleased. What is her son doing becoming an Episcopalian? She didn't know much about the church, but she wasn't quite ready for that transition. So like a good EUB or Methodist, she went off to see her pastor, and she had a conference with my pastor at that time, and her pastor, Reverend Vanderbilt, who had been in our church a long time and was on my paper route, we all knew very well. And so she sat down to tell him the story about me becoming an Episcopalian and how unhappy she was about it. Well, Reverend Vanderbilt, sitting behind his desk, I guess, says, you know something? My daughter, has moved to Denver, and has just joined the Episcopal Church. And she's very happy with it. End of argument. After that, everything went smooth. Well, after 2 years in Rockford, Illinois, I moved to Marshfield, Wisconsin, which is in central Wisconsin, a city of about 15,000 at that time. And I was hired to teach science and math at junior high school, 7th and 8th grade, and outdoor education. So that was my curriculum that I was teaching at this Roman Catholic school in Marshfield, Wisconsin. That was the 70s. It was still kind of, the church was becoming very liberalized during those days, Vatican II and all that kind of stuff. It was a good fit. In fact, they asked me to teach religion class for the junior high school students. They said, but we want you to teach Bible, Scripture, because you're a Protestant. You know Scripture better than we do. So that's what I started doing. And, the first thing I had to do was, how many of you have Bibles at home? No, I was asking my students. Roman Catholic students, hardly any had Bibles at home. That wasn't part of the Roman Catholic tradition at that time. You weren't encouraged to read the Bible. You were encouraged to hear it read in church. So the first thing we did, we had to buy a bunch of paperback Bibles for everybody. But anyway, but in this church, in this town, there's another small Episcopal church called St. Albans. And I became very attached to St. Albans and was very active in that little congregation. Got to know the priest and his family very well. We'd go hiking and canoeing together and that kind of stuff. And I was beginning to feel a call to the ministry at this point in time. And so, you talk to your parish priest. He says, yeah, okay, yeah, you probably should pursue this. Check it out a little bit more. Next step is go see the bishop. So I went down to see the bishop, William Brady, and I told him my story, and he says, yeah, I think maybe you might have a calling, but you've only been an Episcopalian for 3 years. You need to spend at least another year in Marshfield at the church to get a little bit more familiar with the Episcopal Church. So that's what I did. So when it came time to meet with the bishop again, he says, okay, you can go to seminary. You can either go to one of two seminaries. You can go to General Seminary in downtown New York, which of course did not appeal to me at all, being an outdoors person. Or you can go to the seminary in Wisconsin called Nashotah House in southern Wisconsin. And that was the perfect place for me. Nashotah House had a campus of 500 acres of woods and active farmland and a shoreline on Upper Nashotah Lake. And so it was just a perfect place for me. Swimming in the lakes. I slept out many nights in the woods. I tapped the maple trees in the spring and made maple syrup, boiling the water down on a Coleman stove inside the bathroom of the dorm. I fed the birds and the animals. I built cross-country ski trails. And basically, I became known as Yule Gibbons because we were also interested in collecting wild plants. So, skipping over those 3 years of seminary, it came to my senior year. And when you're a senior, you have to start jumping through the hoops to become a priest, to be ordained. You have to be approved by the seminary staff, you have to be approved by the diocese, you have to be approved by the bishop, on and on and on. You have to take tests. Well, it was in December of that senior year that I got a communication from the bishop. He says, I want you to come to Fond du Lac during Christmas vacation and take your diocesan canonical exams. Diocesan canonical exams were 2 days of exams, 1 day of written exams and 1 day of oral examinations. And, that was another one of those hoops you had to jump through. Well, I said, oh, sure. I went home to Ohio, had my Christmas, came back, met with the bishop and the testing clergy. The first day I sat through the written exams, I got finished, and the bishop says, I'd come into the office, I want to talk to you. And he says, how did the exam go? I said, I guess okay. I think I knew most of the answers. He says, I have a parish for you up in northern Wisconsin. And he pulls out his date book. He says, we need to get you ordained as soon as possible. I said, I haven't even taken the second day of exams. He said, I'm sure you'll do fine. So he pulls out the exam. He says, okay, now he says, I will come to Ohio to ordain you in Ohio. I said, oh, no need, my family's not Episcopalian. That wouldn't make any sense at all. I've been an Episcopalian in Wisconsin. I've been seminary assistant at the cathedral in Fond du Lac for 2 years now. This is my Episcopal home. So he says, okay, so he looks at his calendar, he says, now this is about December 28th or 29th. He says, how about January 10th?
Oh my.
Which was 2 weeks. And a couple of days from when we were sitting there, I said, I guess that's okay. And so he, we scheduled for the 10th and everything. And, most people in seminary plan their ordinations. It's kind of like a wedding service. You plan it out weeks and months in advance and everything. I had 2 weeks. He says, the bishop said, well, the cathedral and the dean will take care of all the planning. Don't worry about it. So I didn't worry about it. So I went skiing the next couple days after that with some of my students from Rockford, and we actually ended up skiing in what was to become my parish in northern Wisconsin. So we were up there and came back, and then I was getting ready to face what's called the National Canonical Exams, which are 5 days long. And so I said to the bishop sometime along the line, I said, well, Beans, I'm already past the diocesan exams. I'm going to be ordained in just 2 weeks. Do I have to take the National Canonicals? Yes. So anyway, I didn't get out of those. So anyway, National Canonicals were over. I was being ordained. So my family came to Wisconsin on January, and it was a very cold week in Wisconsin that week too, down around 0 below. So so that's how that all happened. So at seminary, my ordination was known as the shotgun ordination because it was happening so fast. And just about everybody in seminary had already made plans to go to this person's ordination or that person's ordination. The seminary professors were planning to go here and there. There was nobody from seminary that was basically free to come to my ordination except one professor who came, which I really appreciated. So anyway, luckily, as I said, the cathedral took care of everything. The next weekend, the bishop loaded me into his car and we went to northern Wisconsin to the Northwoods Episcopal Mission, which was 180 miles from Fond du Lac. It was very cold that weekend. He introduced me to the parishioners up there at a kind of a potluck dinner at a parishioner's house. It was 11 degrees below zero, which is not unusual for Wisconsin. But it was my introduction, and I ended up then being a deacon, and that was my parish for the next 6 years. So my senior year in seminary, I would be in school, and then on Friday afternoon I would take off for northern Wisconsin, which from seminary was 250 miles away in the winter, driving up, sleeping in one vicarage on one night and sleeping in the bedroom of the thrift shop the next night, and driving home 250 miles on Sunday. It disrupted my studies quite a bit. As you can see, you had to get everything done during the week. So anyway, I think I told you before, my parish in northern Wisconsin was about 2,500 square miles. It included one whole county and parts of 2 other counties, 2 national forests, 3 year-round congregations, and additional 2 more in the summer. So it was a beautiful place for me. My county alone, Vilas County, had over 2,000 named lakes. In the national forest. So it was paradise for me, skiing and hiking and swimming and all of those kinds of things. And I'm very, very thankful to the people in those congregations because they taught me how to be a priest. And I was very, very thankful for them and thankful for them forever. So that kind of lets me tell my story about my ordination anniversary. I'm happy to share it with you today. So I did bring you a visual. And you can't see it now, so I'll have it out there for coffee hour. But here is me in all of my high church glory,
Oh my.
wearing vestments that had been made for the consecration of Bishop Weller in the 1800s, and were very famous vestments. So I'll have that out there for you to look at, see if you can pick me out. And also, after church, I have brought you a treat from Wisconsin called Danish Pringles. So they're out there, so I hope that you will enjoy them.